Leo Martinez stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle like distant cold stars 40 floors below. At 34, he had built a global tech empire that most people could only dream of. His companies generated hundreds of millions in revenue each quarter. His personal investment portfolio grew by the hour. And his name, his powerful and now very famous name, regularly appeared on the covers of business magazines with bold, declarative headlines like the Golden Boy of Silicon Valley. Yet as he stared at his own reflection in the dark, unforgiving glass, all he could see was a stranger, a ghost, wearing a very expensive and very empty suit. The silence in his home wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of deep, profound quiet that pressed against your chest, making every single breath feel deliberate and lonely. He had everything money could possibly buy. But what happens when a man who has conquered the world realizes he has lost himself? And how can a chance encounter with a humble bookstore clerk in a forgotten neighborhood change everything? Believe in the power of human connection to heal a lonely heart. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner. His life was a fortress of carefully constructed perfection. But when the last high-stakes meeting had ended, when the final billion-dollar email had been sent, he would always return to this beautiful, silent prison of his own making. His phone buzzed constantly with invitations to the most exclusive parties, to the most important business dinners, to the most high-profile charity galas. People wanted to be seen with him. They wanted to shake his hand. They wanted to be able to say that they knew Leo Martinez personally. They laughed at his jokes, whether they were funny or not. They agreed with his opinions before he had even finished speaking. And they called him their friend while they're sharp. Calculating eyes were busy trying to figure out what they could gain from the connection. He had learned a long time ago to navigate these shallow, transactional relationships like a grandmaster at chess, always thinking 3 moves ahead and never showing what he was really thinking or feeling. That particular Wednesday started, just like any other. But something, for some reason, felt different. Maybe it was the way the cool autumn light fell across his massive, polished desk. Or maybe it was the fact that his latest and most hostile corporate acquisition had closed without the usual familiar and very empty thrill of victory. Whatever it was. After his last meeting, Leo found himself walking, instead of taking his usual chauffeured car service. He had told his driver that he just needed some air, but what he really needed, what his soul was crying out for, was something he couldn't even begin to name. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the simple, easy rhythm of a normal neighborhood until he found himself standing in front of a small, unassuming bookstore. It was called Hidden Pages. The storefront was narrow, wedged between a bustling, noisy coffee shop and a quirky vintage clothing store. The window display was filled not with the latest best-selling thrillers, but with stacks of well-loved, classic novels arranged in careful, precarious towers that seemed to defy gravity. A small, hand-painted sign in the window advertised new arrivals and old friends. Something about the warmth, the quiet, gentle light that was glowing from inside, made Leo, a man who had not read a book for pleasure in over a decade, push open the heavy, old wooden door, setting off a small, cheerful bell that announced his arrival. The smell hit him first. The rich, earthy smell of old paper, of ink, and of something else. Something warm and comforting that reminded him of his grandmother's house, a memory he hadn't revisited in years. The store was larger on the inside than it had appeared from. The street, with narrow winding aisles that formed a labyrinth between the towering floor-to-ceiling shelves. Soft, gentle jazz music played from a set of hidden, high-quality speakers and everything. The entire atmosphere of the place felt completely and beautifully unhurried, as if time itself moved a little differently here. And that's when he saw her. When she noticed him standing in the doorway, she smiled. It was not the practiced, professional, and very calculated smile he was so used to receiving from the women in his own world. It was something else entirely, something genuine, and something completely and utterly unassuming, Leo realized. With a jolt that he was staring, and for the very first time in his adult life, he was profoundly and deeply grateful that his face was not on the cover of this month's issue of Forbes magazine. She didn't recognize him. She didn't see the billionaire. She just saw ... him. Leo returned to hidden pages 3 days later, telling himself, with the practiced logic of a CEO, that he simply needed a book recommendation for a weekend he had, with an uncharacteristic lack of foresight, accidentally left free of obligations. But the truth was far more complicated and far more simple. Since his first visit, he had found himself thinking about her at the most unexpected moments. During tense board meetings, while reviewing quarterly reports that detailed the rise and fall of entire corporate fortunes, even while his own very expensive personal chef was explaining the intricate details of the evening's gourmet menu. It wasn't just her face he remembered, though she was undeniably beautiful in a natural, unassuming way that felt like a breath of fresh, clean air in his own very manufactured world. It was the stillness she carried within her, the quiet, gentle way she had made the chaotic, noisy world feel manageable simply by existing in it. The bookstore was busier this time. It was filled with the warm, happy hum of the afternoon crowd. Leo waited patiently while Stella helped a young mother find the perfect series of books for her 8-year-old daughter. He watched the way she knelt down to the child's eye level, the way she spoke to her directly, with a serious and very real respect about brave princesses and talking animals. There was no condescension in her voice, no adult impatience with the beautiful, meandering wonder of a child's mind. She treated the little girl's very important book selection with the same quiet, gentle seriousness she had given his own random, aimless browse. When the family finally left with a tall stack of colorful picture books, their own faces full of a simple, happy gratitude, Stella turned to Leo with that same genuine smile. In the grand, intimidating boardrooms that were his natural habitat, he commanded attention and respect without a single conscious effort. But here in this small, quiet bookstore, simply asking a humble clerk for her advice felt like the most natural, yet the most profoundly vulnerable thing he had done in years. Stella's eyes lit up with the pure, unadulterated enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting their entire life for exactly this question. Leo considered the question more carefully than he had considered most of his multi-million-dollar business decisions. Something shifted in Stella's expression then, a flash of a profound and very real understanding that made Leo feel seen in a way that was both thrilling and just a little bit terrifying. "I know exactly what you mean," she said softly. "Wait right here." She disappeared into the deep winding maze of the bookshelves, leaving Leo to study the small, beautiful details he had missed on his first visit. Handwritten recommendation cards were tucked between the books, filled with the personal, heartfelt notes from both the staff and the other customers. A bulletin board near the register displayed announcements for local art shows and community poetry readings. Everything about the space, he realized, was curated not with a cold, corporate marketing strategy, but with love. Stella returned with a slim, simple volume that looked well read, its cover soft with age. Leo read the title and the author's name, neither of which he recognized. "What makes it so special to you?" For a moment Stella hesitated, as if she were deciding whether or not to share something deeply personal. Then she smiled, and Leo realized with a jolt that he had been holding his breath, waiting for her answer. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the book warm between Leo's hands. Around them, the bookstore hummed with quiet activity. But Leo felt like they were the only two people in the world. In his world, people wrote business plans and quarterly reports. The idea of writing about feelings seemed both foreign and fascinating. Their conversation was interrupted by another customer, but Leo didn't mind waiting. He used the time to observe Stella in her element, noting the way she remembered regular customers' preferences and how she handled difficult questions with patience and creativity. She moved through the store like it was an extension of herself, knowing instinctively where to find what people needed, even when they couldn't articulate exactly what that was. When the store grew quiet again, Leo found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He talked about the loneliness that wealth couldn't solve, the way success felt hollow when there was no one to celebrate with, who cared about him rather than what he could provide. Stella listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions. That made him think about his own life from angles he had never considered. As closing time approached, Leo reluctantly prepared to leave. He had purchased the book Stella recommended, along with two others that had caught his attention during their conversation. More importantly, he had found something he hadn't realized. He was looking for someone who saw him as a person rather than a position, who valued curiosity over accomplishment, who made silence feel like connection rather than emptiness. Walking home through the early evening air, Leo felt something he hadn't experienced in years, anticipation for tomorrow that had nothing to do with business meetings or profit margins. He was already planning his next visit to Hidden Pages, already thinking of questions he wanted to ask Stella about her writing, her dreams, her way of seeing the world. For the first time since building his empire, Leo was hungry for something that couldn't be bought. And that hunger felt like coming alive. 3 weeks later, Leo's life had developed a rhythm he had never imagined possible. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he found himself at Hidden Pages, timing his visits to coincide with Stella's shifts. What had started as casual book browse had evolved into something deeper. Long conversations that stretched past closing time. Shared cups of coffee from the shop next door, walked through the neighborhood that felt like explorations of a world he had forgotten existed. Leo had never told Stella about his wealth or business empire. In her presence, he wasn't Leo Martinez, the billionaire tech mogul, who simply Leo, a man who had discovered the joy of reading fiction again, who looked forward to Tuesday afternoons, more than board meetings, who found himself writing thoughts in the margins of books for the first time since college. Stella had awakened something in him that success had buried curiosity about life beyond profit and loss statements. On this particular Thursday, autumn had painted the neighborhood in shades of gold and crimson. Leo arrived at the bookstore to find Stella arranging a display of new releases, her hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the window. She wore a soft burgundy cardigan that made her look warm and approachable, like someone you could tell your secrets to without fear of judgment. Over the past weeks, he had learned that Stella spent her mornings writing in a notebook at the coffee shop before her bookstore shifts, crafting stories about people who found magic in ordinary moments. Leo took the pages with the reverence of someone handling something. "Precious, may I read it now?" Stella asked, looking suddenly vulnerable. "While you're here, if you trust me enough to let me," Leo said gently. Stella nodded, then busied herself with straightening shelves while Leo read. The story was beautiful, lyrical without being pretentious, emotional without being sentimental. But more than that, it revealed the depth of Stella's heart, her ability to find profound meaning in simple moments, her understanding that love leaves traces in the world long after the lovers are gone. Something shifted between them in that moment. The comfortable friendship they had built over weeks of conversations suddenly felt charged with possibility. Leo found himself reaching out to brush a tear from Stella's cheek. Instead of pulling away, she leaned into his touch. Leo held his breath, waiting for her to pull away, to treat him differently, to become calculating like everyone else in his world. Instead, she smiled. Relief flooded through Leo like warm rain. Leo leaned down and kissed her. Then I set her. Then, soft and careful, like he was afraid she might disappear. But Stella kissed him back with a certainty that made him feel more grounded than all his business success ever had. When they broke apart, Leo rested his forehead against hers. 6 months later, Leo stood in the same spot where they had first kissed, holding a small velvet box and trembling with nerves. He had closed the bookstore early, filling it with the soft glow of candles and the scent of Stella's favorite flowers. When she arrived, expecting their usual Thursday evening together, she found Leo waiting among the books that had brought them together. Through happy tears, Stella said yes, and Leo slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook not from fear, but from joy, so complete it felt like coming home. They were married 3 months later in the same bookstore, surrounded by friends and family, and thousands of stories about love in all its forms. Leo never stopped being wealthy, but he learned to use his resources differently. He established a foundation that supported small bookstores and emerging writers. He and Stella traveled the world, but always came home to their neighborhood, to hidden pages, to the place where a lonely billionaire discovered that true wealth comes not from what you can buy, but from what you're willing to give. Your time, your attention, your authentic self, to someone who sees your heart clearly and loves you, not despite your flaws, but because of your courage to be real. In the end, Leo had everything he had always thought he wanted, and something infinitely more valuable. Someone to share it all with. Someone who had shown him that peace isn't found in possessions, but in the quiet moments between two people, who choose each other every day in a bookstore filled with love stories, including their own.